Welcome to Centre Court, all thanks to OMF Australia, designed and owned. I'm Bianca Chatfield, and of course, Maddie Brown is joining me at the desk. Finals fever is here.
My goodness, the finals on the weekend were unbelievable. I mean, first extra time for the year, but first extra time in a final since 2016, grand final against the Thunderbirds and the Swifts. So, oh my goodness, what a treat.
Oh, what an absolute treat. I loved sitting in front of the telly and watching those games. Let's delve into it a little bit deeper. Let's get to the weekend that was, all thanks to OMF. Upgrade your sleep game with a quality mattress from Australian designed and owned OMF. All right, let's touch on that first major semi-final between the Swifts and the Thunderbirds. When these two teams played against each other, let's talk about their history.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
It was early days that the Thunderbirds really came up against the Swifts. We knew that game went in, only lasted a half.
Yep.
And then that was cancelled. So we didn't get to see these two teams playing until right at the end of the season. And what a treat it has been in round 14 and now. People thought the Thunderbirds potentially showed their cards too quickly by having the defensive changes that the Thunderbirds made. But Tanya Obbs was making some really clever moves throughout that game to get them the win.
And she's done that throughout the season, and sometimes it has worked and sometimes it hasn't. I think when she's got that full list of Thunderbirds players available at her disposal, she did. She made some really mastermind, brilliant moves. The players know their roles really well and seamlessly transition. But it was a slow start for the Thunderbirds, and it just seemed like Swifts were about to take off with momentum, but it rained super shots. 8 from 10 for Helen Housby and 6 from 8 from Eleanor Cardwell. But for me, it was the pressure on those shots and exactly in those clutch moments, those players taking them. Unbelievable from Lucy Austin when she missed it. Taylor Williams gets the intercept, comes back down, nails it, goes into extra time.
And you even look at Lucy Austin, 13.5 Nissan net points or something that she got. And it seems really like it doesn't tell the tale of what game and what she could do in those moments. And when we do look at the Swift shooting end, there was some just uncharacteristic, misses from Imelda Aiken-George under the post. We know she gets a lot of offensive rebounds, so she rebounds a lot of those balls. But they're starting to get a little bit costly, I think, for the Swifts.
They are. And, she misses those close ones under the post, but then nails a two-point shot. And I think shocked everyone, even herself, in nailing it. But for me, it's about those really experienced players in those moments wanting the ball in your hand. And, it can be risky, but with risk can sometimes come reward. And you just need those players to take the game on.
Yeah, and Latanya Wilson, Shamira Sterling, I know we talk about them a lot, but, they were fabulous for the Thunderbirds. And being able to move around in certain positions, I don't think it's easy for any player to go from wing defence to goal defence. It's a very different game. Wilson does that seamlessly. And even, the game ended with Matilda Garrett off the court, which we wouldn't have thought that really.
No.
But they've got the options. And how amazing was it? Those final, when the siren went to see the Thunderbirds celebrating, the first time they've played a final since, 2013?
Yep,
and
when they won the grand final.
Into another grand final. What a moment.
It was unbelievable to just see, as you said, you see that emotion, you see Sterling fall to the ground because you're like, wow, look what it means to this team. As I said, they've silenced me as a critic because I was like a few weeks ago, I was like, oh, the wheels are starting to fall off. But in 2 really big games, they've stepped up and showed us what they're really made of.
Well, when we look at the other semi-final that happened, you were over there, Maddie, in Western Australia for this one, the Fever and the Vixens. We know these two teams have such a huge rivalry. It ended up being a 7-goal win to the Fever. Probably doesn't tell a real tale of the game, though, that unfolded.
No, not at all. It was just back and forth the entire time. And, at halftime we looked at the stats and there was not a lot separating them. Obviously, there was 2 points on the scoreboard to the Fever, but statistically, shooting was the same, penalties were the same, turnovers was the same, gains, not a lot in the game. But for me, it really only came down to the final couple of minutes. And it's not that Vixens played bad at all. They still played some really good netball and there were some great tussles between, opponents on the court. But it just came down to that final couple of minutes and it was like, who is going to literally grab this game by the neck and just shake it absolutely out? And for me, it was Courtney Bruce. Absolutely fantastic. She came into play when she really needed to. All of a sudden, when Bruce stands up, the crowd stood up. And, unfortunately, the 7-point difference really doesn't show because it was only 1 goal in it majority of the time.
And we know the Vixens defensively. They lost Jo Weston early from that ankle injury. She did eventually come back on the court. They didn't probably get to put the team out there that they wanted from the start defensively. But across the whole 60 minutes of that game, only 4 gains to the Vixens. That's so low. And then in the end, they ended up with 82 penalties to 60 Fever. And even then, Courtney Bruce, I think, had 7 gains just to herself. It just shows what a dominant performance it was.
Oh, and you talk about you need to get that game ball. The only way to get game ball is to build that pressure and put the Fever in those uncomfortable positions to try and get some ball back. But, you know, with trying so hard, they actually were penalised and put out of play. So it wasn't a lack of trying to get the ball. It was just they were penalised, they were put out of play. That pressure didn't build. And then, as you said, in the end, too much of a deficit and, just not enough game ball. And even when they did get that game ball, they weren't. They were quite costly with it. They didn't convert it at a high percentage.
Well, we are going to touch on the Vixens season a little bit later on in the show. We're going to delve into a little bit deeper about the season that was for the Melbourne Vixens. Okay, that was the weekend that was, all thanks to OMF, Australian Design and Own. It's now time to get to Maddie's Minute, all thanks to Flight Centre, your real deal centre, playing centre for over 40 years.
Well, B, I want to talk about the grand final. So the grand final already been sold. It's going to be at Cain Arena, but we now know that there's going to be 2 interstate teams. Best part of it is general public tickets are already exhausted. You can't actually get any. The only tickets that are available will be obviously offered to the teams that actually make it. So Thunderbirds will get their allocation.
And members of the teams as well, I assume?
Yes, I think that's obviously where that is. So, you know, I think we've all been back and forth, you know, do we sell it off? Are we really in that much of a financial, deficit or debt to have to sell it off? And you go, oh no, we might not have a Melbourne team there, but netball is still well and truly alive, and the crowds on the weekend showed that as well. Huge numbers, 18,000, nearly 19,000 people attended those minor and major semi-finals. But for me, it's just like, who does this suit better as an interstate team? Because Thunderbirds have not won at Cain Arena this year. 21-point loss to the Vixens, 3-point loss to the Magpies. Swifts, 1 win at Cain Arena this year to the Vixens. Fever, no wins at Cain Arena this season. So looking at that, you go, well, maybe Smiths had the upper hand, but part of me thinks that, some of these interstate teams playing in front of big crowds at home have actually caused a little bit more angst and pressure amongst them. So maybe this is a good thing for all 3 teams that are, Thunderbirds being in it, but the 2 vying for that grand final position. Maybe this is exactly what they want.
And I know maybe we're a little bit biased, but with the Thunderbirds, we were there at the Adelaide Entertainment Centre when they played Lightning. We were talking up the whole game, the whole coverage where, there's over 9,000 people in this stadium. We thought we're going to see the Thunderbirds really come into the finals with so much momentum. And they didn't seem to be able to lift with that huge crowd who were behind them. It really seemed to not affect them, but just really get in their way, and they couldn't own those moments. And so potentially playing away for them would actually be an advantage.
Well, they've obviously played away with massive crowds in Sydney the last 2 rounds, and it's worked. So for the Thunderbirds, maybe just that little bit of a monkey off the shoulders that you're not at home. It's only an 8-hour drive or a nice little short 40-minute flight over. So fingers crossed they'll get as many fans there. But I'm eager to see who they're going to come up against.
And also, how much do we love an away trip? Like, there's something about being away from home when you can be together as a team. You're on this mission together. You're on the flight together. You're staying in a hotel together. You're not all living your separate lives and just coming together on game day. Like, I think it actually will be an advantage for both teams to be able to have that isolation in the lead up to a grand final.
Yeah, just as you said, it really just hones in that you're there to do a task and there's no other distractions but really embracing what you're in, embracing the pressure, the whole build-up of what a grand final feels like. So really, at the end of the day, I think it's a great thing to obviously put those bids out to have grand finals that can hold big numbers, big stadiums that can hold big numbers.
Well, apologies, I just hijacked Maddie's Minute right at the end. So it went for about 5 minutes.
You can hijack it anytime.
But Maddie's Minute is all thanks to Flight Centre, your real deal centre. Now it's time to get to Take 5. This time, Maddie, I'm throwing some of the questions at you. We did touch on the Thunderbirds just then, and I'm just going to ask you straight out, can the Thunderbirds go all the way?
Absolutely, and I've been one that's ebbed and flowed throughout the entire season with them. I'm like, yes, they've got the players, but do they have the mental fortitude and kind of resilience when it really counts? And I think the last 2 weeks I've been really impressed with they've stuck to their game plan of rotations and doing those things. I thought, maybe she'll go back to the standalone, but I've actually loved the way that they've, been. Their kind of season has given them everything that they really needed. They've had the draw, they've had really good wins, they've had close wins, they've had times when they've been quite poor.
They've had delayed games, they've had power outages that have cancelled.
They've had it all, and we do talk about this, in a season for teams when you actually have those kind of lived experiences. When you get into it again, and if you've learnt and you've reviewed it really well, it pays dividends in the end, and I think it will for the Thunderbirds. So they're kind of my pick. I'd love to see them win. It would obviously be really good for the competition. But yeah, I think they can go all the way. And I've definitely been one to go, I'm not sure that they have it, but they've absolutely silenced me that they can do it.
And I think they're going to be the fan favourites.
Yeah.
Even if your team's not in the grand final, are you going for the Thunderbirds? And I'm sure once we know who the second team is, but will everybody jump on the Thunderbirds bandwagon because they want to see them get that grand final win?
Yeah, I think so. I think, there's some incredible players within that and really good storylines. I mean, even a Matilda Garrett, she's from Victoria. Obviously over there, Kathy Fallows is a coach Victorian. So, there is a bit of a Victorian flavour over there in the Pink Army. But, I'm excited to see what they can do at the big dance.
All right, let's talk about pressure moments, because we know a lot of finals, and we've already seen in the semis, come down to these pressure moments. How do you own those pressure moments, and how do coaches deal with those moments? Are we making the right moves at the right time? And have we experimented enough, do you think, the coaches in the lead up to getting to these big games?
Well, I think it comes to, players, but also coaches. And over the weekend, we saw some really good examples. Tanya Ops, it worked in her favour. She made some really big moves at really clutch moments. Bryony Akel brought Fawns on, hadn't played at all. She struggled last week against the Thunderbirds defenders. For me, I was like, Helen Housby, this is your moment, take that shot. She passed it off and then went for the rebound. I was like, would you still stay in a position that Fawns might be able to palm it off? So, yeah, it's those clutch moments. And for players, you need those big occasion players to want the ball in their hand and take the risk, because with risks can sometimes come rewards. But for me, even coaching, Dan Ryan stayed true with his 7, didn't rotate at all. Vixens, once they started to obviously go behind on the scoreboard, I would have loved that masterstroke from obviously Simone McInnes bring Mundy on, shuffle it down. We saw the Mannix and obviously Lewis combination. We haven't seen it a lot. So for me, some coaches nailed it on the weekend. I think Tanya Obbs definitely did, and obviously Dan Ryan just stuck to his guns. Bryony Akel, I'm like, why not roll the dice? You've got a second chance, and maybe she's learnt a little bit more about, a Fawns in those moments.
Yep.
And talking to Helen Housby going, that's yours. That's your shot to take. You have to take that. And sadly for the Vixens, it's over. But for me, they did have the changes. We just didn't see that shuffle from wing attack down, and maybe that was the one thing that they missed.
And now we'll see how much teams will learn out of, especially the last round that we've seen. All right, we've heard whispers now about this 8th team. We record this show out of the SEN building, and we didn't even realise that they put in for another team, or put in for that 8th licence. We know Netball Victoria have confirmed, and I don't know if SEN have confirmed, but it was in the Herald Sun last week. Have you heard anything else? And what do you think about these 2 opportunities? Jeff Lord, who put in from Belgravia Leisure, he's pulled out. Yep. Netball Tasmania have pulled out, so it's definitely not going to be there. I don't know if there's any others. And if you have heard about any other teams or licences that put in it, last Tuesday was the last opportunity to put in the tender.
Yep.
And how many weeks have we got till we know?
I think players have been told that it'll be 2 weeks from that close-off date. So we're probably sitting middle of next week is when maybe we hit an announcement. Hopefully we can get an exclusive here potentially.
So quick!
It is so quick. But if there's only one real contender, which is a Netball Victoria and potentially, obviously, SEN, maybe they'll work together. We know Craig Hutchison has, Bendigo Spirit in the basketball, women's basketball, Perth Wildcats in the men's basketball, loves a bit of a regional feel. So maybe if it is going down the highway to a Geelong, both can play a bit of a part in it, definitely for the next 12 months to just get this 8th franchise up and running and give put it in a really good spot to actually then have success beyond next year. So yeah, if there's only one contender or 2 that potentially could combine together, well, why don't we get the answer this week, I guess? But
imagine too, once the answer is there, it'll be everything has to be in motion very, very quickly.
Well, I do wonder maybe they've pushed it out going, well, we probably do know where the franchise is, but we really need the CPA done because nothing can even be signed until that is finalised anyway. I do think it would actually be really kind of wise to then sign the CPA but not open it up to everyone until the 9th.
Yep.
So then there's no disadvantage to any team, and all of the 8 teams have access to every single player.
Yes, I think that is absolutely fair and equal. All right, let's talk about the Vixens season that was. If you were assessing them, what would you give them out of 10? And also, where do you think their strengths and weaknesses lie?
Well, out of 10, they probably...
That was a question without notice.
out of 10, they were probably sitting around that. They probably finished exactly where I think they deserved to finish in the end. Like they really struggled to push above that 4th mark once they got there on the ladder. We saw the Spider last week. They sat at 4th and they really couldn't push any of the top teams. They lost some uncharacteristic games, I think, to bottom teams. So it was really topsy-turvy for me. Strength-wise, they do have the experience and they do have players, but then you go, well, is that a weakness now because they've been together so long and it's been the same thing and it's just that grind, and where's that extra motivation going? And someone like a Madi has been awesome for the mid-court, but potentially with another Melbourne franchise or Victorian franchise, you could lose someone like her. That's going to be the hardest thing for them, is to retain what they have. There are a few whispers, maybe Kawenda might want to retire after a World Cup. There might be a few people that want to move. So I actually think that's not a bad thing for the Vixens. I think a little bit of a change in their personnel, continue to keep their core group. Strengths, they've got great players. They've shown they've got some incredible style of play, but their plan B just they haven't nailed it just yet. So a little bit of change in personnel, I think, wouldn't go astray for them. But a topsy-turvy season, and I think they finished exactly where they needed to finish.
Okay, well, our next one for you, I think it's time to turn our attention to the preliminary final that will be happening this weekend. It is the West Coast Fever up against the New South Wales Swifts. Look at the 2 gun defenders on your screen. Sarah Clow and Courtney Bruce, who will be representing the Diamonds at the World Cup. These two, I think, have a really important role to play. And
yep.
I know that's probably something that everyone's like, no surprise there. But these 2 defenders can pull in a lot of ball and they can really shake up 2 teams that have the opportunity and can shoot a huge volume of goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about these 2 players, like they're the ones that, you can have shooters that obviously, blow the game apart.
Yep.
But they're kind of very similar in the shooting circle. I think it's going to come down defensively to how you stop it. They've got the tall goal shooter at both ends, Jamaican shooters. You've got the kind of agile goal attack out the front in Housby and Glasgow, can shoot the super shot. So defensively, where do you get that game ball and how do you convert it? Swifts looked a little bit fragile, but then also Fever, I think at the end we were like, oh my goodness, thank goodness we won that. That was a bit of a relief for them. So, and at times when they've been tested, they've struggled to play that ugly kind of grind out netball, where Swifts seem to just embrace that a little bit more. For me, you look at how they've played out this year. Round 4, Fever won by 11. Round 9.
That was in New South Wales as well.
Yes. In round 9, Swifts win by 1, but no Glasgow in that game. Obviously, Nat Butler came into the mix. So we haven't really probably seen both of these teams at the best. And you talk about, obviously, round 4 in Sydney. Round 5 is when Swifts started to take it.
Yes.
That was like the shift in them.
Yes.
So we haven't really seen both of these teams at full strength. So coming off what's happened on the weekend, that hunger's got to be there. And I think prelims are the absolute hardest games to win. They're the hardest games to lose as well, because you're so close, but you're just not quite there.
Yeah.
I think that element, I'm going to say Swifts only because of the home court advantage, and they don't have that travel element where Swifts came off Tassie, they've been at home, but they've got to get on the road again. It just might pay a bit of a toll in the long run.
And I wonder if Fever have packed their bags to go from Sydney, where if they win, to come straight to Melbourne to prepare for the grand final, or do they go back to Perth and then come back again? Because that's a lot.
Yeah, I reckon you'd plan for it.
Yep.
Of course, there is that, you want a continuity, you want to go back to your home bed and stuff, but that extra travel coming over and back and forth, if it does play a toll, bring him here, as you said, really get him in together, like focus, go, we've got one last chance, and, they're the only people that can go back-to-back, so if they really want to have a crack at it, and the last team to do it was Lightning, obviously 2017 to 2018, yeah, I'd be keeping them together for the whole week on the East Coast.
Okay, so your tip Swifts?
Yep.
Just be different. I think the Fever are going to win, just by 3. Actually, deep down, I really do think the Swifts. I think the Swifts and the Thunderbirds will have an all-time classic grand final. Let's hope anyway. Make sure you do get in touch with us on our socials. They're on your screen right now. Any gossip you're hearing about the 8th team, anything that you're hearing about in the netball world, let us know and we'll make sure we discuss it next week. That's been Centre Court for another week. All thanks to OMF, Australian Designed and Owned. Thanks, Maddie.
Thanks,
and
Bea.
we'll see you all again soon.